do medical devices, education technology, and manufacturing have in common? On the surface, not much. But today's guest has found a way to connect the dots between these industries in a career full of curiosity, adaptability, and problem solving. From navigating career pivots to shaping culture in diverse workplaces, he has stories that go beyond the job titles and into the heart of what makes great leaders and teams thrive. Whether it's tackling challenges head on or finding opportunities in the unexpected, his journey is packed with insights that I know you're going to find valuable and hopefully even inspiring. Welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and this show is all about the people shaping the manufacturing world, their stories, their journeys, and what makes them who they are. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you're enjoying the podcast, take a moment to leave a rating or review. It helps others discover these stories by rocketing us up the charts every time you rate and review the show. You can also find all of our episodes at themfgconnector.com. And don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok to share your thoughts, your journey, yourself, whatever you want. And of course, check out our other show, The Manufacturing Connector, over on YouTube. It's your go-to source for real-world solutions, product demos, and innovation in action. If solving problems is your thing, you're going to love it. All right, back to today's guest. Garret Tornquist is a senior product manager at Epicor, leading efforts in CPQ solutions and partnerships that help manufacturers innovate and thrive. But what makes Garret's story special is his breadth of experience. Garret's journey is proof that sometimes the most interesting paths are not linear. From growing through challenges to shaping culture, he's learned lessons that are as practical as they are inspiring. So let's get to it. Garret Tornquist, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Jim, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Awesome, man. Excited to have you here. So, Garret, before we dive into your story, this is a Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Let's set the tone. What does culture mean to you? And can you share a moment where you saw great culture in action, or on the flip side, a time where its absence made a massive impact?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, culture is something I've had a lot of thought about and a lot of experience with. I think the culture is something that I personally believe is very underrated within organizations specifically. And the ones that I see have the most success have a great culture. Those that, maybe don't have success or maybe have, more, kind of linear growth, um, I would argue maybe don't have the best culture. And something that I think is really comes from the top. I think that's probably the most important piece. If leadership believes in the culture, it's contagious. It's going to flow. If leadership doesn't, I think it can fall very, very flat. So when I think about culture and really what it means to me, it was hard. It was difficult. I was, started to think a lot of different directions. How do you put more words around what culture means? And for me, I started to think that I feel culture is something that is really how people work together and really the values that are kind of aligned or embodied there. So I kind of, came up with my own thought there. I feel like it's a little generic or basic, and then started to look up really what culture is, and it's more about, the values that people represent or the business that organizations represent, which really got me thinking even more about where does culture come from, or why is it so important? Probably one of the biggest examples of success that I've seen with culture, and something I think has influenced my entire life, is something that actually happened in my childhood. Jim, I don't know if you're familiar, if your listeners are familiar with, but the 1980 USA Hockey Olympic team that won gold, beat the Russians in the third, actually the semifinal game. But the team that Herb Brooks assembled there, I think, was one of the coolest stories I've ever seen of a team mentality and a culture that overcame what people didn't think was possible. So for what it's worth, I might go into a quick backstory there. The USA hockey team was a bunch of misfits, a bunch of college kids that didn't even make it or hadn't made it to the NHL yet. They couldn't be professional; it had to be amateur. And they were playing up against one of arguably the best hockey teams in the history of the sport. The Russian team was, one of the best that's ever played. They played against the NHL All-Star team and beat them. They was no question that the Russians were going to win gold. I think that if you were a betting man or you were in that type of thing, there's no chance you were betting against them. And to kind of cut to the end of it, they did end up beating them in the semifinal game, and where the Al Michaels famous line, "Do you believe in miracles?" came from, and then the U.S. went on to win the gold. And I think the piece of
which is
that
so
I believe
awesome.
is so important. It is, and it's one of my favorite movies. For those who haven't seen it on Disney, it's a great film, Miracle there. But to me, the biggest part was the team, the culture that they had built, was something that I think overcame everything that was against them. And it resonated with me with when I was a kid. I think I was, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old when this movie came out, and hearing and Herb Brooks say that in the movie, the name on the front of the jersey is a hell of a lot more important than the name on the back. Took a while to
Mm,
sink in, but it means a lot to me. And right, so the brand of your jersey has the team name, the Team United States of America, and then your player, your name's on the back, with your name. So it's saying that the team is more important than the individual, and that is a type of culture that I believe is very very successful, and something I've seen within my personal career have a ton of success. And when it's not, when you're putting yourself first, or others, you see that happen, it creates more of a contagious or toxic culture, in my opinion. So that's an example of one that I've seen that's it's really really important, and has a ton of success, and I've seen it translate. My sports career growing up. I played hockey and lacrosse, and on the lacrosse teams that I was on in college, the team first mentality mattered so much. And then I'll come into a business where I'm at Epicor, working with a small team with an acquisition company, previously KB Max, on the CPQ product. That culture flows through the entire group. People care more about the success of the product and the team than they do their individual success, which I think flows nicely into why we see so much success with the CPQ team and product. One of
awesome.
my, early on in my career, one of the things that I noticed as an intern working for a manufacturer, um, I'd say it was a smaller business, but at the time it was in the city. It was in a small city. The business was a good chunk of the business. A lot of people worked there. It was a manufacturing place, and it was bought by private equity. And I'm an intern. I'm still in college, finishing up. I've never had a professional career in my life, and doing this internship was fantastic exposure for me. And we get to kind of this equity, or this leadership meeting where the new owners come in and they're presenting to everybody in the entire org. We stopped. I'm sure everyone knows, right? Manufacturing, when you stop the production floor, it's very very expensive and costly. Well, they felt it was important to do, so we stopped. Everything was stopped. We had this huge meeting, where leadership was coming in and kind of expressing what they want to do with the business, why they purchased the company and whatnot. And one of the things I thought was really really interesting was the new owners came in, and it was a recreational manufacturer, so you could buy it as a consumer. And the new owner, one of the people on the board, had mentioned that they needed to go out and buy, our product. Well, the problem was is they mentioned our competitor's name, which was very very close. And to see how that impacted the people that assemble this product, to see how that impacted the people sitting next to me that have been working there for 15, 20 years, I thought was really kind of eye-opening for me. This was something to show that really shows how important people, take, or how people take pride in their work that they do and the culture that they represent. And I felt like this was maybe fix a misconception that people that go to their job, they just go to their job and that's what they do. It's not a lot of pride. They don't take, don't really care if you go use theirs or the competition. It's just a job. And I think that has resonated with me since it's not the case. People take a lot of pride in what they do. And I believe that comes from the culture that the organization sets in and maintains within the entire organization. So that was another big example of something I thought was pretty eye-opening from my perspective early on in my career. That's really shaped how I kind of view maintaining a strong culture for the teams that I'm on, as well as the business that I work for.
It's awesome. Um, so take us back to the beginning, Garrett. What are some key experiences that you had growing up that have shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think going back to right the USA hockey team and that the movie, right? Seeing that, always kind of seeing people around you that care about the individual successes, maybe the individual stat lines, maybe that individual promotion that you're looking for. As a kid, we played on sports teams. I always played in team sports. I didn't play a bunch of individual sports. Big golfer now, but that's besides the point here. But when you play in these team games, you can't win individually. It's just impossible.
Hmm.
When you're not on the same page, if you're going for those individual accolades, right? Maybe again playing hockey, maybe instead of taking that shot because I wanted to score the goal myself, it's about making that pass so that someone else has a better chance to succeed, and putting the team's needs above your own. And I think that is one of the most important lessons I've personally learned. in the sense, and the lessons, but something that I truly believe in and is so important to culture, right? So when we're doing that, when you're giving up, your individual success over, the greater good of the team, you're seeing that the team have better success. And when I was playing on teams growing up, if there were individuals that maybe didn't care about that, right? They want to be the one to score the most goals or be the star of the game. It often hurt the team because they're not doing what's best for the team, right? Teams maybe isolate on that. They understand that they can go after that individual as opposed to, if you're playing a good team game, you're passing the puck well, you're going to score, and the other opponents isn't going to be able to defend you all that well. And I think, again, you can really point to that 1980 USA hockey team, and that's what they did. They didn't have, I shouldn't say this. They had a lot of, bad blood. There was college kids that were playing against each other in the national championship game, and now they're on the same team. That's part of the story where they went through this, kind of animosity or these challenges as a team and came out better ahead. So for me, that's one of the biggest lessons that I've now seen, roll through my career. Something I care a ton about. I'm not going to go and join a team where it's all about the individual successes, where you're stepping on people to get to the top, because it's not what's best for the product. That's not what's best for the organization or the team. And I truly believe that, if the team has success, my personal gain will come as well, right? So if the team's doing well, if we're all doing well, I'll be a part of that. I'm a part of the team. I'm going to have success as well. Because I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to have success. That's probably fair. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that it's so important to have the team success first, and then the individual successes will follow after. I think it makes it easier to not have to worry about questioning what you're doing maybe ethically, right? Are you doing what's best for you right now because it's going to benefit you, but maybe it doesn't help the company? Maybe that becomes a problem later, right? So I think that's a big thing that started when I was younger that I've flowed through, not just sports, which I think is interesting where it started, but flowed through my entire academic career all the way through my business professional career as well.
Awesome. Garret, take us through your college journey through to today. I mean, we've heard a little bit about your youth. Take us from that college to where you are today, because you have been you've had your hands in, I guess, a couple of different industries. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I started off in college, I mentioned I had that internship. And at the end of the day, I was so close to graduating early, but in order to continue playing lacrosse, I had to have a full-time, academic schedule. So I
Yep.
took an internship for credit, and it was a great opportunity for me to start using my kind of, things that you've been learning in school. I'd, taken a bunch of classes. My job in high school and college was more of, working at a golf course and just, bussing tables or working in bev carts. And it wasn't super applicable to what we were doing. I wasn't able to relate what I was doing. But when I went to school, you're learning all these things, talking about the big professional world, and I got to the internship, and I thought they were gonna have this plan laid out for me, and they didn't. They just kind of came to me and said, "Hey, let's talk about what you're doing and what you're learning, and just maybe help us out." It's like, wow, that's a pretty unique internship here, because at the end of the day, I was thinking, hey, I'm right out of college or getting ready to be out of college, thinking that everything is so easily planned out and businesses have it all together, and was expecting this internship plan, and I just didn't get that. So I all of a sudden just started getting my hands in anything that I could, and I really gravitated towards the pricing structure. I think that's something that is really unique to businesses that maybe don't always have it figured out. I think pricing is a very great way to kind of improve your margins, maybe increase your revenues with things, and found myself doing a value-based pricing structure and kind of providing different recommendations based on things I learned in school in conjunction with the data that was provided through the manufacturer that I was working for. I also talked about different product pieces, ways that we could, grow the portfolio and on needs from the customer, look at our competition, how are they doing things, what are they introducing, and ultimately then had a big presentation at the end of my internship of all the things I've been working on, and it was a great experience for me. It's supposed to be about a 30-minute presentation, it ended up being about 4 hours long. And it was a lot of great discussion with our leadership team that I was, again, an intern at. I'm just talking about the things I'm learning. And I think it was kind of interesting because I think there was a bit of a frustration from the CEO. It could be maybe just to draw my own conclusion or not, but I felt like he was a little frustrated and felt like, why is an intern telling us all these things? Why aren't we doing these things before? So that was a nice pat on my back for my internship, and ultimately started, working for them full time after. Got into that space. And again, got a great opportunity to kind of work with a manufacturing company where I was kind of at the office side of things, while there's, majority of the, employees are on the back end working the manufacturing lines, working on, building the products that we sold. So after a while, I went through a sales training program with theirs. Apparently, I did a good job. Didn't think so because there's a lot of acting, which I'm terrible at. But they liked, the way I took initiative and went into the training program and learned a lot, and wanted me to get into sales. So I jumped into the sales team just to kind of experiment with it a little bit. I never really wanted to do sales long term, but I realized quickly as a marketer, marketing and sales work so hand in hand. So I figured let's get into sales, understand how they walk the walk. If I can understand what they're going through, I can understand their challenges more firsthand as opposed to just from the grapevine or hearing things, right? So I did that for a bit. They wanted me to relocate, and I decided this isn't for me. So I decided to leave the company. Took a short-term job or short-term temporary job, and then landed within the educational space on the technology side. So again, another manufacturer that I've been working with, and on the product side, but a small business gave me the opportunity to kind of dip my hand in so many different things. Depending on the meeting, I was introduced as a product marketing individual, or if it was another side, I would be introduced as the product manager of the product portfolio that I represented. And for me, one of my favorite parts of the job was, working with every single department that I had, and I spent a lot of time in the shop floor working with the teams on how are we going to be assembling these products. What does that process look like? Because it was something that we didn't have a ton of um, policies in place or structures in place because it was a small business. So I got a lot of exposure to the manufacturing floor and got to know a lot of these individuals quite well. And another thing that came back up with working at the educational company was how much pride individuals take in their work. Right, I go back to my kind of preconceived assumptions that I had prior to my internship, that people just show up, they do their job, and they go home, and they don't take a lot of pride. I don't know, but I really realized that manufacturers they take a ton of pride in their work, and as they should. I believe that. I take a ton of pride in my work, and I don't know why it took me so long to realize this, but it was great to see these individuals that are working the lines, kind of building the products that we sell, take all this pride in what they're doing. So while I was at this company, I decided to go back to school, get my MBA. Wanted to kind of learn more education, as well as have that degree while I was younger. I figured if I get older and start a family, it might be a little more difficult to go back to school. So I figured let's do this. And I think my favorite part about that was being able to learn something new and take it to the office the next day. Like, hey, we should implement this, or we should try to experiment with this. And being able to use that was a way different style of learning as opposed to prior undergrad, coming out of my college job at the golf course, where I didn't really understand what things were applicable or not. So taking everything I was learning there, bringing it to the office was great, and eventually got to a point where I wanted to kind of get into a business that I was a little bit more passionate about. And what I mean about that is, what is the impact that we're having on individuals, or of what the business that I'm working for is, which got me really interested in the medical device space. I think when you're working in med device, it's one of the most, I think, rewarding industries from that side of things, when it comes to being able to help improve the quality of people's lives. Right, I'm working on new products that are going to help people with, let's say, COPD or asthma. It's really rewarding to be able to kind of work on projects like that, as opposed to maybe on things maybe more recreational or things like that. So I absolutely loved working in med device. It was a great experience on the product management side. We continue to work with manufacturers that we had here at the facilities, and again, seeing that pride that they take in their work, I think was unprecedented of what my expectations were. So I think that's something that I believe it goes very underrated. I think it oftentimes can get overlooked, but it's something that I really appreciate. So after some time there, to me, it was time to just, wasn't maybe the right fit at the organization. There was kind of some rocky stuff going on, that I felt maybe it's time to get out and go experience something else, which landed me at where I'm at today at Epicor. Started off on, kind of the cloud products, which is very, I don't say new, it's been around for a long time, but it's taken off quite a bit over the last handful of years, and landed with the Epicor CPQ team. This is an acquisition company of Epicor's back in 2021 called KB Max. It was a business that was mostly in the United States, has some international colleagues and customers as well, but really a global company, yes, but predominantly here in the States. And it was something that I was very excited about. This is an acquisition of the company. They're excited about this. They want to make it successful, and I had the great opportunity to lead this team forward as we kind of continue to integrate within Epicor, solve for the Epicor customer needs, but also still represent our standalone business as well. So as the product manager, I really work on our roadmap. Where are we going as a product? Work with the cross-functional teams to help solve different gaps that we have, and ultimately, help the product that we have helps manufacturers. What's the easiest way to put this? Like streamline business processes, help streamline sales processes, make it a lot easier to configure products. And this is now where I'm at today. And again, back to the culture piece, I think this is why I love my job so much, is getting to work with this acquisition company that had such a strong culture. They really built a team first mentality culture that everyone goes to work for the product and the team, and there's no egos. There isn't putting the individual above the success of the business, which is something that I've now gravitated towards and found myself having a ton of success with personally, as well as, kind of just having a much more appreciation for what I'm doing. So a long-winded answer there, and kind of I guess my background, but a lot of different overlaps within manufacturing space, different spaces that you kind of mentioned, and just learned a ton about why culture matters so much to businesses and why it's something that I think it should be a bigger focus and priority of organizations.
I love it. I love it, man. Garrett, all of your experiences have been in that manufacturing space, as you said. What drew you initially to manufacturing? Was there that moment that you're like, I want to work in manufacturing, or is that how'd you end up in the industry?
That's a great question, and it's something I gotta admit I had no intention of it. I didn't know it was a thing that you should focus on, or something that you should be gravitating towards. It happened to be I was looking for jobs right out of college, right, and all of a sudden I saw a job with the title marketing in it at one of my previous employers, and just landed in it. Same with the internship.
Wow.
Again, just looking for marketing jobs or internships, landed in it. And I will say, like, I really am happy that I did. It's something I've had a ton of enjoyment with, because I think it is one of the backbones of America, of being able to manufacture a lot of stuff that we do here, and has helped build the global economy that we have today. I will say, supply chain, I think, is another big piece that in the manufacturing space is so important. Something that I learned a ton about when I was in grad school at Arizona State. It's one of the things that they kind of gravitate towards, and how important supply chain is to the manufacturing space. So it's something that learned a ton about, and was able to kind of see the impacts quickly through all the different things that we do. And I think it's really cool to see all the softwares out there today that are making manufacturing and supply chain that much better. It's something that Epicor truly believes in. I think that's another great piece. When you're working closely with the verticals that Epicor is in, manufacturing be the main one. You get to see a business really take to heart that whole built for you by you. Epicor is very big on working with our customers to help understand what their problems are, what their gaps are, and building solutions that address those. And that's not something you see a lot. I think that's something you see a lot in practice, or what people suggest. Yeah, we talk to our customers, we listen to our customers, we build what they want. But I've never seen it more kind of exemplified than I have at Epicor, which is another thing that I'm really proud to be a part of. When we're talking with customers on a regular basis and building solutions that meet their needs, as opposed
Yeah.
to telling them what we think that they need, or what we believe that they want. Because that is one thing I've noticed as a kind of I don't say a gap, but when you work in software, it's a completely different world than the actual manufacturer, right? Like a lot of times I think, when I came from my manufacturing organizations, I worked with a lot of the ERP suppliers, or I worked on an ERP implementation project. And as much as we love software at the software company, we are not the manufacturer. And I think that's a pretty big gap oftentimes that you see when maybe you've worked in software your entire career. So maybe that's something that I bring to the table, being coming from manufacturing, and then now working at the software vendor that supplies software to the manufacturer. But I think that is a gap. But the good news is Epicor does such a great job of listening to the manufacturer to understand what their gaps and problems are. So I don't know, it's a long kind of, I guess, winded answer there, but it's something I think is super important to kind of look at when you are, building products, whether it is manufacturing them or, building software solutions as I am today.
Is there a moment that in your career that you can point to as like that pivotal moment uh, that has shaped the way that you lead people?
Yeah, that is a really good one. And I think I look back at, maybe it's not just a whole one moment, but a compilation of things that I think have allowed me to kind of reflect back on it. When it comes to leading, I think that is another piece that's so underrated when it comes to organizations and success. I think that there's, everyone hears about right micromanagers or being too hands off, and um, I think that no one thinks that they're a micromanager, or I shouldn't say no one, but most people don't. I mean, maybe they might be, right? And I think to me, when it comes to a leadership approach, there's something about, empowering people to do their job better and trying to help elevate them up as opposed to telling them what to do, or, trying to think that you're doing the right things. And for me, I look back at, my entire professional career, starting off as, in mostly product marketing, I would say, and kind of get my hands in product. Now I'm in product management, but at the time, my education company, small business, having to lead, from, I don't say from behind, but it's more of, I don't have direct reports, but I got to lead different teams forward. And it became abundantly clear to me in grad school, I would say. It was a big focus in grad school, was leadership, was working with teams successfully, and how to empower people as opposed to, telling them what to do, or whatnot. And I felt that in grad school it was a really, I guess, I mean, I'm pointing to a specific situation, so I'm glad we're talking about this. But in grad school it was, I don't say a humbling experience, but a unique experience where we're all going to get the same degree, but we all have vastly different backgrounds. I was going to school with, doctors, CEOs of companies. We actually had someone that was a presidential candidate. I was shocked by that. There was a state representative from Arizona that was presidential candidate in my program.
Wow.
That just floored me. Yeah, so you get all these people from all these different walks of life that have various levels of, leadership, power, control, whatever you want to call it. And I'm over here, an individual contributor to an organization, and I'm about, in less than 10 years in my professional career, and we're on the same playing field, right? So it was a really cool experience to work with these individuals where you didn't have the power or control over someone. You couldn't just tell them you have to do this, because we're all students and we're all individuals. So it was this way to kind of find motivation through, the way I see it is kind of as a team. And maybe this, stems back to kind of my roots as well, where we're in this together. I need to motivate you to kind of be a part of this, and want to, kind of, in, what's the right word, kind of want you to have success so the team can have success. So I kind of focused on, leading by example. How can I lead that way? Kind of going to work, working hard, put in the effort, coming up with different ideas, strategies, not being lazy or not putting in the work, I think is a huge turnoff that people kind of feed off of. So when we were doing this whole team approach without, direct authority, it really shaped how I believe leadership should work, as opposed to more authoritative, if that makes sense. So the graduate program was a huge piece to me that opened my eyes to, leadership, and how it's something that is so important to organizations, and if it's not done properly, I think can has a lot of problems. And then for me, another big piece was after the fact. After I was done with school and got my graduate degree, I felt, what are other ways I can continue to evolve and grow as an individual, and it, resulted in really just books. I love reading different books and getting different perspectives from experts. And some of the big ones that I really gravitated towards were Jocko Willink and his kind of, extreme ownership strategy. Extreme, he's got leadership tactics and a lot of stuff from there, as well as Simon Sinek's approach to leadership and inspiring people with your why, as opposed to, again, maybe your result. And
Hmm.
something, I guess, maybe kind of thinking about this as well. I really believe that, a lot of organizations focus on the numbers, the dollars behind things. How much money did you grow? How much revenue did you generate? What did you lead to sales wise? And I don't say a big problem with that. I just don't think that's the right motivator. I think that, Simon Sinek was one that said this really well, is that, dollars, revenue, sales, that's the result of your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? So to me, inspiring people through, how you're going to impact customers, how you're going to, again, back to maybe the med device days, helping improve the quality of people's lives, and then driving to that dollar point afterwards as a metric to watch as a result of the work that you've been doing, I think is so important, and something that I believe motivates more than not. Kind of one of the things I look at with leadership, oftentimes you see, large, goals put in front of you about dollars. How are we going to generate X more dollars in revenue or in profit, or increasing our profitability? And those are the goals of the organization. I just have such a hard time with that, because I don't believe that motivates the majority of the businesses, especially when I look back at my manufacturing days. That's the amount of, outside of maybe say job security, maybe for manufacturers. I think it's not something that motivates people. If you maybe at the top, if you're a leader and you maybe got bonuses or big, paydays based on it, well, yeah, that's of course be motivating to you. But to majority of businesses, where a majority of the employees don't have a massive bonus structure or maybe equity in the organization, that's not motivating. It's nice, right? It makes you feel better. Hey, we hit our numbers. That's great. But it doesn't push you, in my opinion, to that next level. What it does is explain, why we're doing what we're doing, how this is benefiting our customers, and really pushing on those types of, goals and objectives to help lead organizations, as opposed to, hey, let's get to X, Y, and Z dollars because that's what our board of directors told us to do or something. I don't know. That maybe a long-winded answer for you there, and just kind of rambling a little bit, but it's something I believe is so important to organizational success that is oftentimes, I believe, done the incorrect way, depending on how the organization positions it.
Garrett, what is a leadership tenet? You're talking about Simon Sinek and Jocko. What's a tenet that has been true no matter where you've been in your career, no matter what company? Uh, they're all in manufacturing, but they're much different types of companies within manufacturing. Is there a leadership tenet that rings true in all of those organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something that I think about if I'm thinking about all the different ones I've been a part of that's kind of echoed across the board. I think probably the biggest one that I firmly believe in is again back to maybe the team mentality leadership strategy. I think that
Okay.
there's something important about leaders that get in the trenches with you and help solve the problems. That's they're not above the work to needs to be done or something. I think that goes a long way with the people that are doing all the work, right? If they're willing to get in and jump in, I think that means a lot to the team. I think that supports growth. I think it supports kind of that culture of the organization if leaders are able to do that. I think that I've seen in previous orgs or different teams where maybe their leadership considers themselves above something like that, and it just doesn't resonate nicely with, in my opinion, the team that's working on it. So I'd say that's probably the biggest leadership piece that I think is important, and as well as kind of that, again, back to that team mentality. So yeah, probably say that's the biggest one that I've noticed quite a bit about.
Um, are you in a position at Epicor to help influence and shape the culture there?
Yeah, that's a great one, and I believe to an extent it's a massive organization. There's over I think there's about 5,000 employees across the world within Epicor, and I'm one,
Right.
right? But I think that's also a great piece that Epicor does is we do have quite a bit of employee feedback, employee engagement. It's something they take very, very seriously here, and I, for one, also believe in it. I think it is important to try and help shape culture. So it's something that I, work closely with the team that I'm on. I do push where I see, issues or challenges of something like that. And I believe that leadership is really receptive to that type of information or feedback, which I think is fantastic. I mentioned a little bit about the revenues or, just pointing towards dollar targets. That's something that
Yeah.
I'm, obviously you can probably tell I'm a proponent that, should not use that as your driving metrics and goals. And I've been able to kind of share that with my leadership, and I believe that's being, received well. I see, with decisions that have been changed and how we approach our goals, I think is a big one, and use that more than the metric that's, maybe the result as opposed to what is actually the key indicator of success there. Because sometimes it doesn't happen, right? When we look at maybe what's doing best for the customer, maybe that's not always what's best profitability wise or something like that, right? And obviously you got to, take that with a grain of salt always, because businesses need to make money to be able to stay in business, right? And you want to drive profitability for different reasons. Maybe you can point to other things down the road. But I also think it's super important for organizations to explain why that's important, right? Even if you, like, let's say profitability, for example, if they need to increase their profitability, and instead of just saying that, like, let's talk about why that matters, right? And to me, when I look at some of the great successes I've seen from organizations using this, is we need to increase our profitability so that we can accomplish X, Y, and Z, or so we can invest in something else. That's kind of what's holding us back to get there. And I think that's a great way to that kind of marry those two together and give organizations that ability to kind of still use those, easy metrics, because I believe looking at the dollars is very tangible. It's very easy to understand and see why it's a thing, as opposed to, hey, we were able to help, let's say, improve the quality of life of X thousand people or whatever it is, right? I think there's a big piece there of being able to kind of marry those two together and explain and justify why maybe those metrics or things that we have to do are important. So I think that's probably a big one for me.
Awesome. Along those lines, what do you want your legacy Epicor to be?
That's a fun one. That's yeah. I guess I've never honestly thought much about legacy. It's not something I've put too much thought into of what I'm doing at Epicor. I think for me, I hope that I left the product better than I got it when I took over. I think that's probably the biggest one.
Okay.
I will say, when I took over the job that I'm in today as a product manager, I took over for one of the founders of KB Max, which was the acquisition company, which right at the time I didn't realize was the case when I had my jaw hit the floor when that happened. I was like, oh boy, I got to go join a team that I'm taking over for one of the founders who's built this company from the ground up. That's some massive shoes to fill. And for me, making sure that I don't tarnish, what they have built, I think is important. Make sure I don't, mess up or wreck what they've built is important. So when it comes to then the legacy, how do I, leave this better than when I got it? But also, how do I help? Epicor purchases for a reason, right? They purchased a small company to fill a gap in their product portfolio where they, felt that it was losing them deals or something. And it's they can offer, the CPQ solution in conjunction with their ERP. They can now solve a lot more customer needs and requirements. And so if I, if and when my time comes to an end at Epicor, right, is that something I've helped accomplish? Have we grown the CPQ business to help them sell more ERP and get into better spaces within that space? That's super important to me. But ultimately, I think when I look at legacy, I hope that the people that I've had paths crossing with, I think this is another tenet that I have is I don't want people to have to work with me. I'd rather have them want to work with me. And if I can kind of leave a legacy of people wanting to work with me and someone that they respect because they trust me, because they enjoy working with me, and appreciate the work and value that I bring to the team, I think that's another big piece. So when I look at maybe the individual level, that's something that I'm very passionate about because I do believe that's important to build those relationships, build that trust, build that respect with individuals that you work with in order to drive the success of the product and business as well. I do believe that there's maybe faster ways to get to short-term success by maybe being a little more bulldogish or kind of more pushy or making harder decisions that maybe aren't as favorable for the longer-term success of the team or the product. But it will get you those short termers. But it's just not a philosophy that I believe in, and it's not something I can do internally. So that's something I also really believe a lot in when it comes to the I guess the legacy that I leave within Epicor.
Love it. Um, we all have moments in life that define us, and typically those come from failure, right? Can you share a moment that you failed and how that experience has shaped your approach to your work and personal lives?
Yeah, that's a good one, and something I personally believe quite a bit in. I believe failures is so important to do. I think it's something that if you fail and then you learn, how do you make sure you don't
Hmm.
maybe cause the same failure again? And I think that it also means that you're pushing the boundaries. If you're maybe in any role and you're never failing, it means you're not pushing yourself or pushing maybe the product. In my position as a product manager, you're not pushing the product where you could go. And I can point to a ton of situations where I have failed, and we've had to go back to the drawing board and figure things out. And I think some of the biggest things that kind of I'm trying to think of maybe a one-off story or a one-off situation that was the biggest. Um, I'd probably say in one of my previous organizations, we had basically kind of tried a new promotion on a strategy that we were kind of doing, and it just it didn't go well. Like it fell flat. We didn't sell a
Yeah.
ton. We gave away more than we should have, and it didn't resonate with customers. And we look back to the drawing board. It's like, look, where did we go wrong? And that's the biggest piece, right? So then we did a handful of promotions after that. We actually had a lot more success with. But it was all about those learnings behind what we did. For us, it was understanding we didn't do enough of our homework. We thought we knew what we wanted to do. We moved way too quickly. Didn't kind of do that back end work to actually understand what we were trying to accomplish, to understand why we were doing it. We didn't look at the data behind everything. That was all things that we did that did not succeed or that led to the failed result. The next times we went forward, we did our homework, right? We looked at the back end stuff. We looked at the margins on things. We actually asked the right questions. We pushed a little bit on leadership, who has a lot of great ideas. They move quickly, Well, not being afraid to ask those questions on why. Why is that something we want to accomplish? What is the goal there? Because I think that's also super important, is to understand, what is the direction or why leadership wants X, Y, and Z, is so that we can then, maybe offer different ideas or approaches or strategies to accomplish that. I think that's another big piece to it. So, but when it comes to failure, it happens all the time. There's a lot of different things you can point to, but at the end of the day, to me, the most important piece is, what did you learn from it, so that way you don't make the same mistake next time. And again, I do believe it's super important to experience failure, because you grow personally and you grow as a team, you can grow the product, and learn from those failures is super important. And I think it's also important for the culture of the organization to accept that. I believe that
Absolutely.
I've seen organizations shift where, if the culture doesn't accept of that, or it's a very quick to point fingers and blame, it just causes problems. People aren't going to want to try new things. They're not going to push the boundaries on things. They're not going to go out of their way to maybe say what they believe is right versus doing what's safe, right? I think it's another big
Mm,
piece to it. So if leadership supports, a culture of failure and growth and opportunity, the businesses, in my opinion, are going to have a lot more success, because people are able to do what they think is right, even if it goes against the status quo, or pushes the boundaries on something. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, what's right? The definition of sanity: doing the same thing, expecting different results. Well, if that's what's safe, but it doesn't get you maybe that, exponential growth that you're looking for, well, if the leadership isn't okay with that, well, then you're not going to get people that are willing to do that, which means they're never going to push the boundaries. So for me, it's super important that at the leadership level, that is a cultural tenet that is accepted and okay with. And I think it's something that can be coached by leadership as well, in order to sit more that safer environment, to know that, so people know that they feel that they can accomplish and do things like that.
love it. Love it. Garrett, have you ever wondered if you are in your career uh, not on the right path to what your goals are, and how do you continue to push forward?
Yeah, that is fair, and I think about it all the time. I got to be completely honest with you, Jim. I don't have a ton of, I don't say mentors. I do have a ton of great mentors in my life, but I never had this kind of clear path, from, say, like the family perspective. Like, this is what my parents did. They kind of had their different style of career, and I think it's completely different than where I'm going with my career. And my parents have
Yeah.
a great career with what they've done. I nothing against what they've accomplished and what they've done. It's just different than what I have. So for
Mm,
me, I'm always like, hey, I got here. This is where I went. This is what I'm doing now. And I think a lot of people have that thought, and I do feel, yeah, sometimes I'm all over the place. Like, I would, at this business, now I'm at this business, and now I'm at this place, and for me, I'm having a lot of introspective for myself on what I care about and what matters the most to me, and a lot of that comes, and I will say, early in my career, I thought it was about the best titles and the most amount of money I can make, and trying to do those types of things, and I've come to realize that's not the case. For me, it's
mm,
about working with really good people that care a lot about what they're doing. They care about the success of the product and the team over their own individual successes. Working on a product that maybe has that value, that they can offer a ton of value to an organization, or an individual, right? I would go back to my med device days of being able to work for an organization that was improving the quality of people's lives. Like, having that extra impact, I think, makes a ton of additional value that I didn't see before, or when I was younger in my career. So, do I question, like, where am I at the right spot today? Yeah, I always wonder, like, hey, how did I end up here? This is something I never would have guessed in a million years to be working at Epicor, working on a CPQ product, if you would ask me that back when I was in college. But do I absolutely love what I do? Yes, I get to work with one of the best teams that I've had the privilege to work with. We get to make a group that is so committed to the success of the product and the customers that we have, as opposed to the individual, is so important. And we are doing that. We're continuing every single day to push the boundaries on how CPQ can help organizations change the way that they sell their products, how they change their business processes, how they change the entire manufacturing process, is so incredible. So do I know where I'm going to be in 10 years? No, not a clue. If you and I were to chat again in 10 years and we were talking about where I'm at, and asked me the same question, I'd probably have the same answer I have right now. And I don't know if that's a good idea, if that's a bad idea, but it's something I'm just kind of rolling with as I kind of can, figure this out, as I kind of continue to work with people and work on products that make an impact in team. And that's something that I care deeply about, and something that, I feel, resonates nicely, and drives more purpose to what I'm doing, what I do.
So along those lines, what's your goals for 2025? This episode We're recording in 24, but it will be released in 25. What are your goals for 25?
Oh, that's a good one. I think maybe personally and at I guess profession as well. On the personal side, Jim, my wife and I were expecting our first kid. So my goals for 2025 is to be the best dad that I can be. So it's something that's going to be
Oh yeah.
brand new for us, and I'm very excited about. And I think on the professional side, I'm looking to really making sure I balance that life appropriately. I
Yeah.
love, getting into what I'm doing. I love, the work that I get to do, and sometimes you can get consumed by that. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right, like it's important to stay with, family is super important to me, and it's a value that I share. So making sure I can balance those lines appropriately, I think, is super important. On the business side, to me, when I look at some of the goals for FY, or I shouldn't say FY, for calendar year 2025, I look at being able to, on the professional side, how can we take CPQ to the next level? We're in kind
Mm,
of flight. We've been in the works of building some of these really cool new functionalities. We are working towards really revolutionizing the CPQ product, and it's going to be an absolute game changer for our customers and how we go to
awesome.
market. It's something that's been building for years, and we sort of, I don't want to say stumbled upon, but it sort of organically happened, and how we're going to drastically change our, I don't say go to market, but it's going to change how we position, and we open up new markets for us on the CPQ side. And for me, a goal there for the year is to really make sure that we have success with this. Make sure that we're delivering for what Epicor purchased KB Max for. That's so important to me, right? Like businesses, I believe there's a stat out there that 70% or so of businesses or acquisitions are considered failures. And I think that when the key word there is considered failures or may fail to meet expectations. And I want to make sure that this acquisition of QBMax was not considered a failure, considered to fall short of expectations. And we got a lot of work to do. And we're all those things that we've kind of recognized over the last handful of years that have created some of the challenges right at acquisition. We're addressing it. We're fixing a lot of these, and I believe that we're going to far exceed expectations. And maybe a couple of years, maybe not doing the first year, but as we kind of make these pivotal changes, but over the next handful of years, I expect us to make some significant strides in the growth that we make and really delivering for Epicor and what they purchased KB Max for. So
Awesome. Awesome. Um, what's next for the industry as a whole? I mean, this is an industry that has been through an amazing evolution since I joined 20 years ago, right?
mhm.
Um, from your standpoint, what's next for the industry?
Yeah, that's a good one. From when I look at my shoes, right, working for the software manufacturer or the software vendor for manufacturing companies, right?
Mhm.
One of the big things that we noticed is manufacturing space. It tends to be a little bit slower than other industries that move faster, maybe adapt new technologies. And for one
Yep.
example I can point to is manufacturing space typically has a bit more difficult time moving to the cloud. That's something that I believe is now it's kind of a standard business practice, cloud-based technologies, and it's been a challenge to move customers from on-premise solutions to now in the cloud, and just adapting technology is a little bit slower. But one of the biggest things that I see that's not just going to impact manufacturing, software, everything, it's impact of artificial intelligence. I think that is something that is truly going to revolutionize a lot of different industries that we work in, and manufacturing being one of those. And I know it can be scary. I think that we hear from our customers today that artificial intelligence is scary. They don't maybe there's maybe a data thing, maybe it's replacement of jobs. I think that's a big one. But one thing that our leadership, I believe when they kind of came out with this, because I will admit when I first started hearing about AI and the stuff that it's impacting, I was like, yeah, it sounds like it's going to replace jobs. Like that's kind of wild. Like we don't, it's not always good. It's not comforting. And so I had this concern, and our leadership team came out and kind of had this really strong stance on what that actually means or how that could actually impact things. And they had this belief and strong feeling that AI isn't going to replace jobs. People that use AI will replace people that don't. And that
Yeah.
was really resonated with me in the sense that using AI to better yourself at your job, I think is super important. Something that I use today on a regular basis. I work with a ton of colleagues that use it way more than I do, and it has helped me in my day-to-day job significantly become way more efficient, do things a lot faster, do things a lot better. It's a super important thing that is going to propel people forward, and I think that it would be a mistake not to adapt to it or to kind of be resistant against it, just because of kind of the reasons I mentioned. And for me, it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's just getting started. This is something that is going to revolutionize things, and something that, again, people may be scared of, but think about the efficiencies and the productivity of what you could accomplish if you had, 5 of you or 3 of you, if you could do that, like I know personally, if I had more time in the day, there's so many more things I could accomplish. Well, now that I have AI, it helps me accomplish those things faster, which now allows me to go work on those other things that I wasn't able to before. And when you look at innovation, right, there's a way that in manufacturing spaces where AI is going to help maybe augment things or automate things, it's going to open the door for so many more opportunities, right? So now you're going to need more people to accomplish the things that maybe you don't have as much time now to accomplish, or the breadth of what you can have. Let's say maybe you have 5 products. I'm just throwing a number out there. AI, I believe, can open that door for you to now increase maybe your product portfolio or the offerings that you have or the services that you have, which now creates even more jobs as opposed to eliminating them. So
Yep.
I really believe it's going to make people more efficient and better at their jobs and what they do, and help people grow, as opposed to say the scary piece of it's just going to replace my job. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, yeah, I think some jobs may, but it can reallocate those people into other roles that are maybe more fulfilling or more rewarding, and provide them more challenges, as to help them grow their careers. So I think that's probably the biggest piece where I see a pretty significant shift coming, to not just manufacturing, but across all industries per se.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on what shaped up to be an incredible conversation with Garret Tornquist. Garret, thank you so much for joining us today. From his career journey to powerful lessons that he's learned about leadership and adaptability and building a strong company culture. Uh, there's so much to take away from this episode, man. There were so many mic drop moments. I appreciate you. One thing that really stood out to me, Garret, was your perspective on company culture, right? And how the Miracle on Ice really shaped that. And I love that line, and I always forget it, and then somebody brings it up and I remember it. The name on the front of the jersey is more important than the one on the back. So thanks for reminding us about that, because ultimately that goes for companies too. The name on the door is more important than the name of the department, right? Or whatever you want to look at it. So I love that, man. I loved your view to the future of having a kid and learning how to balance work and that personal life and that family and taking intention ahead of time to think about those things. I love fatherhood. So far has been the coolest job I've ever had. I've really messed up a couple of times, right? I've made those mistakes, but it is a really cool job, and so I'm really happy for you. Looking forward to hearing more about that journey, and keeping in connection with you. So thanks again for sharing your story with such honesty and passion. You've given us a lot to think about and uh, really reflect on. So I really appreciate that. To you, our listeners and viewers, thanks so much for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, a colleague, your grandma. She might even like it, who would find it valuable. And don't forget to leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you listen to this, or on YouTube if you're watching it. You can find more episodes and resources at themfgconnector.com. I'd love for you to connect with us over on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Your feedback and engagement mean absolutely the world to me. I'll leave you with this, folks. I want to know what part of today's conversation resonated with you the most. Take some time to reflect on it, on Garret's journey. Think about some of the things he shared and how it applies to your own journey, and then reach out to me and Garret as well, and share your journey with us, and tell us what resonated from this. I'd love for that to happen. Um, until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep telling your story. We'll see you on the next episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Thanks for listening.